Some say he's a villain, some say he's a hero, some say they don't know what to say. But on the 11th day of the 11th month of the year 2021, Frederick William de Klerk, the last apartheid president of South Africa, passed away. Here to discuss his life and times are Professor Mohammed S. Umar, Department of History and Diplomatic Studies, University of Abuja, recipient of the Carnegie Scholars Fellowship Award by the Carnegie Corporation, New York, United States of America, and recipient of the Fellowship of the Institute of Advanced Studies in Berlin, Germany. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Yes, pleased to be here.
Also joining us via Zoom from Germany is Dr. Senayon Olaoluwa. He is the Acting Director of the Institute of African Studies, University of Ibadan, and Pioneer Head of Diaspora Transnational Studies. His publications have appeared in leading journals including African Affairs, Journal of Contemporary African Studies, Journal of African Cultural Studies, amongst others. I'm told due to some network errors, he's not here at the moment. He'll be joining us in a few moments. All right, so Professor, I'm going to ask you, Frederick William de Klerk, villain, hero, or a bit of both?
More of one and less of the other.
Okay, so which do you think he is and why?
If Nelson Mandela was a hero, then you know de Klerk wouldn't be one.
Okay, well, but de Klerk was instrumental, in fact, the instrumental figure in ensuring Nelson Mandela's release. Doesn't that give him a status? He was also the one who worked hard with Nelson Mandela to dismantle the apartheid structures that existed and gave the opportunity for free and fair elections to ensure that Nelson Mandela became president, despite having the influence that his office needed to deny that.
No. With or without Klerk, apartheid was doomed.
Okay.
It was on its way out. In the 1980s and 1990s, the international system has drastically changed with the end of the Cold War. So also the rising tide of what has been called the third wave of democratization. Human rights have become deeply entrenched, and the signs were on the wall. In addition, the armed struggle led by ANC is intensifying. You only need to be a smart politician like Klerk was to recognize the end is here. So how best can you navigate and steal victory out of defeat?
Fantastic.
So
interesting view.
You really, if you think of it, apartheid was doomed. It was grave injustice. Injustice never lasts.
Indeed it was.
So, with or without Klerk, do you understand? Apartheid was going to end. So he, the claim that he facilitated the ending of apartheid is the narrative that he has managed to steal and to portray himself as the great champion for multiracial democracy in Africa.
All right, let's push that a little further. At the point in time, South Africa had just spent billions of dollars, building their own nuclear capability to be able to wage nuclear war against anyone. And we know what nuclear deterrent means. But regardless of all of that they had spent and their military capabilities, which would ensure any foreign power would think twice about invading or supporting, they still stopped down. Are you saying all of that meant nothing?
Yeah, the apartheid was defeated by the internal struggle of the ANC. There was no threat of external invasion.
Yes.
And therefore the nuclear question was irrelevant. Do you understand?
Yes, interesting.
The internal forces in South Africa for nearly a decade in the 1980s leading up to the 90s.
Yes.
After all peaceful protests and argumentation and so on and failed, ANC was left with no option but to embark on armed struggle.
Yes.
Mandela traveled around African countries to galvanize support, and he was the figure, he was the arrowhead of the struggle for the ending of the brutal system of apartheid. This is the important point that needs to be remembered. The nuclear is just a red herring. It's neither here nor there. And besides, yeah, all that Clark did was that he was a brilliant politician, and the best he could have done, which he did, was how to get a soft landing
Okay.
that would
All right,
ensure his
let's
legacy.
not go there. I want us to talk more about that, more about
Okay.
that soft landing part.
Yeah.
Our other guest from Germany is here, Dr. Senayon Olaoluwa. It's good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I was just asking Prof here the same question I asked him. I'm going to ask you, Frederick the Clark, villain, hero, or something in between?
Oh, well, Frederick the Clark for me is a victim of history. And we're talking about the dilemmatic history here. Dilemmatic because in the end, he was neither for the black nor for the minority white. Now, black people felt he should change them in the course of the negotiation that Mandela led on their behalf. Then the minority white will always say, oh, forget about it. He threw our legacy of domination into the dustbin and handed over power to the black.
Yeah.
So where do we place him? So for me, we need to do some sort of dispassionate when it comes to matters of domination, especially of ethnic domination that has subsisted for decades, if not centuries. When it comes to a renegotiation of dynamics, for those previously dominating to step down, you do not expect a kind of cataclysmic transformation.
Okay.
And so for me, to a certain extent, he was still able to do something that was in favor of the previously marginalized black people. And so there was no way, and that's why it's called negotiation. He negotiated transition,
Okay.
to multiracialism. And if it is transition, you win some, you lose some. And that's how to begin for me.
All right, that's interesting. Prof, do you want to respond to that?
I have made my point is that he was just a smart politician who managed to extract some concessions that would have doomed him were it not for playing the role that he did as a peacemaker. He was, I mean, if the revolution, the armed struggle had succeeded in toppling the apartheid regime, Clark would not be celebrated as a big name. He will have been probably paraded before the courts of justice and tried for the crimes his regime committed.
All right. Okay. Let's push that a little further. Now talk about the period of negotiations and all that went through. Now, before he assumed the position and became president, apartheid was firmly entrenched. It wasn't going anywhere, despite the sanctions and all. They still held their ground and refused to move. People say the state had far more capacity for violence than the ANC would, and if it came out to an all-out war, it was going to be difficult for the blacks were going to suffer more damage in terms of deaths. They may eventually have won, but the loss of life would have been a lot considered. Now, during this season, he negotiated and did something that was difficult. He had been a member of parliament where he supported apartheid before. He now became a serving minister and eventually became president himself, where he began to turn against the system. You suggest that he turned against the system because he found out there was no way out and this was the only way forward where he could snatch some defeat. But we see from what the doctor himself had just told us that his own white minority felt that was not good enough. They wanted to still insist that we could still stand, we could still have a few more years. We've seen several countries do it across the world and lasted decades, regardless of sanctions, and still control their people. So, to that degree, does he deserve the Nobel Prize that he got for his efforts because he was someone who was caught in between two fires and eventually has become a man without a place, not liked by some of the blacks, not liked by some of the whites, and just standing by himself in more? Was he in a difficult position? Does he deserve his Nobel Prize?
I awarded it to him, I was not on the panel, but if I were on the panel that would decide, you can guess where I will have voted.
Yeah.
If Mandela deserved the Nobel Peace Prize,
Yes.
surely de Klerk, who had blood on his hands, could not be qualified for that. Don't forget, he supervised throughout his political career.
Yeah.
He was an active, open supporter
Yes,
of the apartheid policy.
Yes, he was.
While he was prime minister, at the height of the struggle, he superintended the killing of innocent protesters against the apartheid regime. Even though he denied that, later on, documentation showed that, yes, he supported clandestine infiltration of the ANC and the opposition to that, and people lost their lives at the hand of the brutal regime of the apartheid, insofar as he participated willingly for the greater part of his career. And insofar as he morally and not morally, as far as he financially and materially benefited
from the system,
the gravity of the atrocities committed by the apartheid regime far outweigh the political footballing that was played at the end.
Okay, I'm going to talk a bit more about the international political maneuvering that had to do there. But I'm going to ask Dr. Olaoluwa, what's your take? Did he really deserve this Nobel Peace Prize, considering all that he went through? Do you agree with Prof, as he said that this was just simply a man who knew he had come to the end of his rope, and it was not about a change of heart or anything like that? It was just about a man who was at the end of his rope and felt this was the best way he could snatch, in his words, snatch victory out of defeat.
Okay, let me begin by referring to something more general, and that is the Nobel Prize for Peace itself. It has always been a controversial award almost every year. And then in coming back to de Klerk and whether he deserved to have been awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace or not, for me, that again speaks to the complexity of the man we're talking about. There are at least two sides to the understanding of de Klerk. And on the basis of that, when you look at it from that perspective of opting to negotiate, opting for a compromise that will lead to some sort of political transformation, yes, he deserves it. But when you look at it from the other angle of his antecedent, as a very staunch supporter of the apartheid regime, as an active state participant, you will say no, it does not deserve it. But overall, for me, he quite deserved it, because there was no way we can talk about peace or a kind of transition to a new dispensation from an extremely violent one without talking about two sides working together. And to that extent, for accepting to tolerate or for accepting to compromise to the extent of bringing about that transformation, for whatever it is, it was what I would say he deserved it. And that's my take.
All right. Okay. So, Prof, I'm going to go back on what we talked about. Internationally, it is a national practice when dealing with despots, dictators, and regimes like that, to make them feel that they are not going to lose if they step down from power altogether. And so in cases like this, they give them soft landings, and occasionally they give them some award so that others in their position will not decide to sit down, sit put in that position and continue and say, okay, since I'm going to go, I can as well burn down the whole country and the whole nation with me. Now, is this a good approach, as we can see, which is your take, that was what was done in this situation? Is this a good approach or is it not?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, a violent overthrow of the regime was averted, and perhaps that would have caused massive upheaval and loss of more lives than may have been necessary. So, yes, to that extent, you can look at the dynamics of the situation, the political calculations that need to be done, the weighing of, the complexity that the doctor mentioned is there, but that, in my mind, does not really balance with the decades of horrendous violence, indignities visited on people for no reason other than the color of their skin. That is a crime against humanity. And he was asked, de Klerk was asked whether apartheid was a crime against humanity. He was equivocating, though he later realized that was not wise thing to do. He kind of rendered apology. Up to the last speech that he posted, that was posted on his foundation, you could see a smart politician skillfully trying to even construct the narrative that would be after his own passing, what he should be remembered. It was a final reminder, remember me, I did these wonderful things for all of you, and don't forget that about me. So this man is not the angel that he may appear to be, because he conceded to negotiate and bring a peaceful end to a regime that was doomed. Now, internationally, there's a moral hazard to allowing brigandage, people who use state power to commit atrocities in the interest of supposed soft landing. You allow them to go scot-free. And there's a moral hazard there. Some presidents have been let to go scot-free, some have not been. So the political dimensions of it and the kind of maneuvering that attends to all kinds of politics, well, it's not always the clear-cut choice that you would want this path.
But sometimes we're forced to.
Sometimes you are forced to take a stand.
All right, doctor. So I'm going to ask you this. We just have about a minute or less. During his time, you talked about his difficulty of being a man, as they say, caught between two fires and with little or nowhere to go to. He negotiated. He was against the Peace and Reconciliation Summit that was set up in South Africa for fear of how it would make some of the whites look, which put him in very bad light with a lot of people. Was that an attempt to somewhat give the whites a bit of, to buy himself some credit with the whites, as he did try to buy himself or bought himself some credit with the blacks by the releasing of Nelson Mandela and all that?
Yeah, I think in addressing this issue about the position of de Klerk, we also have to take into consideration the kind of blank check, let me put it that way, the kind of blank check of reconciliation that Mandela himself already put in place. His credo of legendary forgiveness of his torturers. And so, before the Reconciliation Commission was set up at all, it was already very clear that it wasn't going to be a retributive, kind of panel. And so, a number of people could do things and get away with them. And that was exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Because Mandela doused a kind of national, if not international, tension by saying that minute he stepped out of Robben Island, a free man, he promised himself that he was going to forgive everybody. And so, for me, part of what de Klerk did was to take advantage of that to engage in some post-apartheid, kind of insulation, knowing that nothing extremely terrible will happen to him. And that's my take. It goes back to what Prof said. Like, was just a smart, was just trying to be
smart politician at that point in time.
That's part of his smartness.
Okay. Unfortunately, time is time is already gone out on us on this particular conversation, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface, because I would have loved to begin to talk about issues like social justice at this point in time. How do we balance social justice and security and posterity? It's a very difficult act to do, as you have said. Internationally, do we let him go? Do we not? Do we forget about it? Okay, if we want justice, where does the retribution end? Some will say, okay, kill all the whites. No white man should be alive. Where does it start? Where does it stop? What is good enough? What is justice? It's a complicated situation, and I hope that next time we'll be able to talk more about social justice and retribution.
I hope so too. Thank you for
Professor,
having me.
it's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Doctor, thank you very much for taking the time from Germany. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
All right. You can always reach us on our social media handles on Lens and Africa, ntai@gmail.com, on Facebook, Lens and Africa, NTAI, on Instagram, Lens and Africa, NTAI. You could also reach out to us on WhatsApp only. Message only, no phone calls on WhatsApp, 0901 2210162. From the producer, director, the crew, and everyone here saying, have a good time. See you same time next week, Lens in Africa.